So Eskom has already written off billions of rands in unpaid electricity bills. In 2020 alone, the utility wrote off nearly 8 billion rand in overdue debt. This year, Eskom, or I should say Soweto, owes Eskom close to 5 billion rand, and there are calls for that debt to be scrapped. Someone else who's made a similar suggestion is President Ramaphosa while answering MPs' questions in Parliament yesterday. We can talk about this now with Dr. Trevor Ngwane from the Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee, joining us by phone, I believe, this afternoon. So grateful for your time, as always. So first it was the Gauteng Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, who hinted at a further scrapping of Soweto's debt. Now the President making a similar suggestion. Do you believe those to be genuine calls?
Yeah, I think they are genuine calls insofar as the ANC is facing a difficult election in 2024, and there's a real danger of them losing Gauteng, especially for Premier Panyaza. And I also think that, the penny is starting to drop, whereby, the ANC government is learning to really respond to people's, concerns as it gets hit, by the vote.
Well, it's an awkward promise for them to make, is it not? Because the issue of writing off debt would have to be decided at Eskom. So when you've got a premier making the call and a president hinting that it may be done, it smacks clearly of politics.
Yeah, it is. That's why, I set out that context, But as you know, people are struggling on the ground. And often, for example, the mayor of Johannesburg, who is back now, DA, when she took over, she was very dismissive, of the problems which black working class areas were raising. But when she was under pressure, from the ANC coup d'etat, she started talking the language coming to Soweto and talking about scrapping the debt. What it means is that ordinary people really have to use and fight and exploit and take forward their struggle, in the context of elites and leaders who are half the time opportunistic and self-serving.
But when we talk about writing off Soweto debt, I mean, when you look at what President Ramaphosa said, he said it's something that can be considered. He said debt can be written off, but there need to be conditions. Discussions need to be entered into to find a balanced approach. That does not sound as though it's an indication or a campaign to wipe the slate completely clean. And I wonder if people in Soweto would be satisfied with a conditional scrapping of the debt if it were to happen.
Yeah, if someone hits you the first time, well, we can sympathize with you, Chembekile. But if they hit you the second time, the third time, then it's your fault. You should learn. I think Sowetans are learning now. So, for example, I would say that we don't want Ramaphosa or Lesufi or the ANC government, indeed even Eskom, to give with one hand and take with the other. For example, at the moment, Eskom is busy trying to stop cross-subsidization, from the rich to the poor in terms of what is called the inclined block tariff system. Many municipalities, including Eguruleni, which is why they are in trouble now, DA there, they are scrapping free basic energy, to the masses. So those are the things which Sowetans, indeed, not only Sowetans, all the poor working class people in South Africa should be wary of when these promises, come thick and fast as we build up to a national election.
But it would be disingenuous to pretend that Eskom has not tried to meet the people of Soweto halfway, because just this year in its reporting, the debt, which had been put at around 12 billion plus for Soweto, was then brought down to about 5.3 billion. Why is that not enough?
Well, the real scrapping happened in 2002 in Soweto by Jeff Kadebe, who was the Minister of Public Enterprises. But Jeff had to do it because of a massive struggle by Sowetans. The recent scrapping of the debt by Eskom, it's an accounting entry, it's a legal entry, because it was found that the interest payments, were bigger than the principal debt. So there's an in duplum legal principle, and this is wrong and illegal. So Eskom had no choice but to scrap that debt. So, of course, we are grateful, but you cannot say thank you for that.
But that's an unsustainable way, is it not, to run an entity that's already in desperate need of funds, and it's now expected to write off billions in rands worth of debt because a political party, a president, a premier, want to swing votes in that area in their favour in the next year and a half or 2 years, if indeed that is their goal, which they're likely to deny if we were to ask them. Do you agree?
Well, Thembekile, you are exactly right. Just look at what happened with e-tolling. After 10 years of stubborn ANC policy, unshakable, they kind of collapsed that policy through into the dustbin of history as they see the election coming. In other words, we who are directly affected, must be clear about what we want and stick to our guns. I think with Panyaza and with the president talking about scrapping the debt, we should demand, number one, that there must be a vision of solutions, not only for Soweto, not only for Gauteng, but for the whole country. And those solutions must not be short-term, they must not be election-driven, but they must be long-term and sustainable. Those solutions must take into account, the goal of the government, the mandate of achieving social justice, the question of ecology, of climate change.
Right.
So that is what you are facing today.
And
yeah.
that is exactly the point, isn't it? That if there was to be a wholesale scrapping of debt for Eskom, it would set that sort of precedent where other communities, in order for this to be a fair dispensation, would also have to have their debt written off. And what then do you do in those communities? Do you say everyone's debt should be paid off? Or do we say, actually, people who can, because in these townships you also have people who are middle class and should be able to pay. Do we charge them and say only the poorest of the poor should be allowed to have debt written off?
The people of Soweto, they shed their blood, the children, in 1976, June 16. I'm not saying they're the only ones who struggled. But after that massacre of students, we had the electrification of Soweto. At that time, in fact, until 1990, only 10% of black township residents nationally had access to electricity. So in a way, Soweto is always a pioneer, leading forward. And as it wins its struggle, the whole of the black working class in South Africa wins. So we shouldn't oppose what is done in Soweto with what is done in other areas. But we should.
But there's no indication, sir, that it will be done for other areas. There's no indication that it will be done for other areas because this appears to be a campaign for Soweto specifically. So if what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander. So if you are getting your debt written off, someone in Vicksburg and someone in the Eastern Cape should also have their debt written off.
Exactly. That's
at
my
the
point.
Same time.
That's my point, yes. The guy in Pittsburgh, in Kukuletu, they must also be brought as part of a plan to solve the energy crisis. So it's not just Soweto, but it's structural, historical problems. Remember, I've just indicated, Thembekile, people only started getting electricity in 1990, 1994. So those historical injustices must still be addressed. We cannot just act as if the playing fields are level. So Soweto are correct, and I think it's good that they are setting an example of what must be done for all people in South Africa, especially the poor and the working class.
Dr. Trevor Ngwane, good to have your time, sir. Thank you.